Hello, grade 12 scholars, it's Miss Novak, and we are now in week 6, lesson 27 of your ELA Distance Learning. Let's move through this slide quickly. So first, it's obviously going to be a different lesson. Every day is different, so expect variety. I'll provide you with a list of materials and resources. Hint, they can all be found in your packet. We'll move through a brief overview of the learning for the day's lesson. I'll quickly model a task. Usually it has a writing component to it at the end, and we'll preview the learning for the next day, namely by looking at the next lesson's learning target. Here's a part of our weekly snapshot. So in our last lesson, we closely read The Buried Giant with a focus on the setting. Today, we will focus our rereading efforts on paragraph 4, and we'll look at the details in the text that tell us how the narrator is Axel, feels about ancient rural Britain. We will also think about how the description of Britain from The Buried Giant compares to Bede's description in A History of the English Church and People. Remember, we're going to get our comparison hats on today, so let's get ready. We all love reminders, so let's make our way through some. First, make sure that you remember to share your learning with a family member or friend or perhaps a classmate. You'll also want to complete the weekly fluency practice and chart your progress in your grade 12 learning packet. And finally, always make sure that you make that extra time, 20 minutes or more, for your independent reading. I'm starting to feel like a day would not be complete without a pictogram puzzle. I don't know about this one. Take 15 seconds or so, pause the video if you have to. Think about what types of words and phrases are brought up from this image. We'll reveal the answer on the next slide. Wow, the answer is pair of pants. I'm starting to think that I should have got that right from the start, but hey, it's all right. I'm now in the game. I'm now ready to stretch my thinking muscles for the purpose of this lesson. Before we officially start, let's get out our grade 12 packets, noting that lesson 27 is on page 87. Your note catcher is on page 88, the text 78 to 82, and of course, a pencil or pen or something to write with. Bonus points if you grab yourself a highlighter. Take some time to get the materials ready right now. Before we begin reading, it's always important to review the essential question, which is, what does it mean to call a place home, as well as look into our guiding questions, especially because we're going to now be comparing two texts. Right? Bede's text from last week, as well as our text this week. So what makes a place important enough to write about? And in what ways is home both a place and a state of mind? We're going to think about the two different authors' perspectives and how it's presented in the text. So make sure we keep these guiding questions and, of course, our essential question in mind. Our learning target for today is I can analyze the author's word choices to determine their effect on the reader. So now we're going to get real into the nitty-gritty of the word selection, word placement, and the effect that it has on us, the reader, and the overall story. Today we'll start by rereading paragraph 4, and then you'll talk to someone about the parts in which the narrator talks directly to the reader and the information that he's conveying. You'll think about how the narrator's description about ancient rural Britain compares to Bede's description of Britain in A History of the English Church and People. You'll end by answering two questions about the text in your note catcher, of course making explicit reference to the text in your answers. And of course, the closing, you'll share your learning as well as make time and space for independent reading. Now it's time to reread paragraph 4. If you have a smartphone or tablet, now's the time to get out the Pearson Bounce Pages app to read the text out loud to you, but you may be able to survive with just paragraph 4. I'm going to ask you to mark the sentences in which the storyteller speaks directly to the readers. The readers are us, right? But first, I'll do a quick little model before you launch into this independently. Let's take a quick look at the beginning of paragraph 4. I'll read this out loud and I'll bring you into my line of thinking, having to do with my annotations. So had you been able to roam the countryside at will, You might well have discovered castles containing music, fine food, athletic excellence, or monasteries with inhabitants steeped in learning. Interesting. What are a couple of things I noticed here, especially as it relates to the storyteller addressing the audience? Well, first, I noticed that he uses the pronoun you. He speaks directly to me and kind of makes me stand up right and say, okay, I'm paying attention. I'm now invested more so in the story. I also notice here that he's telling me that even though what he has described so far about Britain has been less than complimentary, we know that, especially from paragraph 1, there were in fact nice parts of Britain scattered throughout the countryside. So it's interesting to note the way in which he makes mention here that it's not all doom and gloom, and he's drawing me in with that pronoun you. Take some time now to finish reading paragraph 4, and in those close reading efforts, lift up those parts where the author is speaking directly to the audience. Now that you've completed a close read of paragraph 4, let's look at the other components of today's lesson. Your discussion component, your talk component, asks you with a family member, caregiver, or friend to talk about the following question. What is the storyteller telling the readers in the sentences you marked? Why do you think he started talking directly to the reader right here in this instance? I see here that the storyteller is only telling the reader about the setting, right? Or is he? What is the effect of talking directly to the reader in this particular paragraph? Furthermore, look at this paragraph. Why do you think that he ends with an apology? And these are all annotations that I made in my margins, but there's something to think about. Your writing component today asks you on your note catcher to write a response to a couple of questions. First, how does the storyteller feel about ancient rural Britain? And how do you know this? Next, how is the storyteller's description of Britain different from Bede's description in A History of the English Church and People, the text that we read last week? Key point here. I know that we don't remember everything. I certainly don't. So if you need to go back and reread the text from last week, or better yet, review your notes from lesson 21, go ahead and do so in your packet. Take some time to complete these tasks now. If you have any questions about today's lesson or your learning, feel free to reach out to your teacher. First name, their last name at DetroitK12.org. I'm sure they'd be interested in your opinion of this text. Now that we've completed the activities for today's lesson, let's take a look at lesson 28's learning target. I can connect ideas from a text to the essential question of the unit. I love these types of lessons because it really allows for us to create a through line from text to text to text to that overarching essential question of the unit. So I'm really excited about this lesson. We've come to the end of another lesson. Thank you for learning with me today. Here are a couple of quick reminders. Make sure you talk about your learning with someone at home, a friend, or a classmate. Also make sure that you're reading for 20 minutes and documenting your reading journey in your grade 12 learning packet. And of course, reading fluency. Don't forget about this step. Not only is this helping improve your reading speed, your intonation, your expression while reading, it also helps in your comprehension. So make sure to complete this step. We'll see you tomorrow for lesson 29.